UITM Business and Finance Research Colloquium.
Greetings, my name is Allister Raut and I will be the first member to present on behalf of our group. First of all, this research is to study the credit risk and commercial bank performance in Malaysia adapted from credit risk and commercial bank performance in Nigeria in the year 2012. So, what is credit risk? Credit risk is a risk of default on a debt that may arise from a borrower failing to make required payments. This research used panel data for the data analysis of 8 commercial banks in Malaysia in the scope of 10 years from 2010 to 2019. This research dependent variable is return on asset. Meanwhile, the independent variables are non-performing loans, loan loss provision, and loan and advances. Below is the summary between the dependent and independent variables. Next, the objective of this study is to investigate and analyze the impact of credit risk on the commercial bank performance. Below are a few of specific objectives. On the next column is the hypothesis of this study. Meanwhile, on the final columns are the 3 methods used for the data analysis of this study. The problem statement of this study is that a credit risk occurs when an account holder defaults or fails to make installments on their obligations toward loan repayments, which is also known as default risk. This is due to bank and finance companies do a lot of interbank activities, lending and borrowing one another to cover their capital deficits and surpluses. The theoretical literature review of this study consists of 2 theories, which are agency theory and financial distress theory. The concept of agency theory is used to comprehend and address the issues that arise in the relationship between the corporate principals and their agents. Meanwhile, financial distress theory stated that financial crises affect both the ability of commercial banks to offer credit and the ability of borrowers to repay their loans. The literature review are taken from 6 different sources as shown on the slides.
Hello everyone, my name is Gloria. For the next part on the literature review, the dependent variable, that is the return on asset, which measure how effective a bank use a limited resource to create profits. Thus, some of the author has concluded in their research, as you can see from the table, on regards the effect of ROA with the 3 variables that are commonly used to assess the commercial bank's financial performance. So, to summarize for NPL, 3 authors have concluded that there is a negative relationship between NPL and ROA. One of the authors concluded that banks with a high level of income are less likely to engage in risky investment that may result in loan non-payment in the future. Meanwhile, Rajan 1994 stated that credit risk is developed not only to generate profit but also to build a good reputation. Therefore, in order for this bank, the banks attempt to make such credit policy from the current earnings in order to offset the loans default in the future period. As a result, the authors concluded that NPL and ROA have a positive correlation. Loan loss provision and profitability have a negative relationship stated by the 3 authors, where it is less loan loss provision means more profitability and so greater safety for the bank. Meanwhile, more loan loss provision means less profitability and without a doubt greater instability for the banks. Some of the authors studied on how and to what extent the credit risk indicators affect commercial banks' profitability, then evaluated and shows that the result of LLP and ROA has a positive significant impact. The first author from the loan and advances stated that if banks operate in increasingly dangerous condition and lack lack of the ability to supervise their lending operation, a high loan loss provision ratio will be necessary to offset the risk. As a result, at a 1% level of significance, the LA is determined to have a negative and statistically significant impact. The theoretical framework, as you can see from this slide, was adapted from Kolapo 2012, where credit risk and commercial banks performance in Nigeria. On the left side, the independent variable has been used in these studies is the non-performing loan, loan loss provision, and loan loss advances. Meanwhile, on the right side is the dependent variable, that is the return on asset. Here, the panel data is used as the measurement of variable in the study. Why panel data? Because there are several banks to be measured across a period of time. The return on asset was calculated as the net income divided by the total asset, which measure the bank's profitability against the net asset and indicates a bank how profitable it is. The NPL will be measured as the non-performing loan by total loan, where it is calculated as the percentage of total loan. Next, the loan loss provision will be measured as loan loss provision divided by the total loan to measure the overall loan and to assess the creditworthiness of the bank. While as for the loan and advances, the measurement will be used by the total loan and advance divided by total deposits. So move on to the methods that we use in this research. The variables are mean, median, maximum, minimum, standard deviation, skewness, and curtices. Next, Jagbera test compare the skewness and curtices of the data to check if they are consistent with a normal distribution, which is less than the critical value, or we can say that the p-value is greater than the significant level. Next is the probability, or p-value, is applied to the correlation coefficient. If a value is 0, it shows that the independent and dependent variable have no relationship. A value greater than 0 indicates a positive relation. When the value is less than 0, then the association is said to be negative. On the other part, the regression model for panel data is used in the analysis of 8 commercial banks for the study. Furthermore, by combining time series of the cross-section observation, panel data provide data that is more informative, less collinearity among variables, and great variation. The mathematical formula is written as coefficient of independent variable 1 and 2 if it's less than 0, and coefficient of independent variable 3 if it's more than 0, which implies that an increase of 1 unit in the independent variable will result in a unit decrease of ROA. Last but not least, the Durbin-Watson test is the most commonly used method of testing autocorrelation, and the null hypothesis HO states that no autocorrelation exists, where H1 states that autocorrelation exists.
Hello, I'm Racheal and I'll be our last presenter. The dependent variable that has been used in the study is ROA. The mean value of ROA is 1.16%. The maximum value comes from M-Bank in 2015 and the Public Bank in 2011, which is 1.6%, while the lowest ROA is 0.6% from the MB Bank in 2015. Based on the probability, the data is normal at 23%. The NPL have a mean value of 1.43%. The maximum value comes from FM Bank in 2010, which is 3.64%, while the lowest NPL is 0%, which is come from the RHB in 2010 until 2014, and the M Bank in 2013 and 2016. Based on the probability, the data is normal at 25%. The LLP has mean value of 452 million for commercial bank in Malaysia. The maximum value of LLP is 2,832 million from Maybank in 2016, while the minimum value is negative 303 million from the M-Bank in 2019. The LA has mean a value amounting 151 billion for commercial banks in Malaysia. Next, the maximum value of LA is 513 billion which come from Maybank in 2019. Meanwhile, the minimum value of LA is 109 million, which come from the year 2011 of Hong Leong Bank. Correlation analysis. Firstly, there is negative correlation between NPL and ROA. When NPL increases, it seems that ROA decreases by 20%. By having negative 1.82, this statistic, it shows that it is not significantly associated. While the p-value is 7%, it seems there is significant correlation between NPL and ROA. Next is LLP, which also have negative correlation with ROA. If the LLP increases, it seems that ROA also decreases at 22%. The t-statistic value is negative 2.05, which shows that it is not significantly associated. While the p-value is 4%, it seems that there is strong significant correlation between LLP and ROA. Meanwhile, LA show a positive correlation with ROA. If the LA increases, it seems that ROA also increases at 1%. The t-statistic value is 0.10, which shows that it is not significantly associated. The p-value shows that there is no significant correlation between LA and ROA. Regression analysis. Based on the analysis the R-square is 16.5%, it seems that the independent variable for this model can be explained 16.5% of ROA, for which 83.5% is explained by other variables which are not in the model. The model of F statistic is 4.87, which indicates that the model used is more appropriate. Thus, for this research, we rejected the alternate hypothesis and only null hypotheses are accepted since the F statistic indicates that the model used is more appropriate for the data. Meanwhile, F stat p-value is less than 5%, then the model for the research is fit. The Dubin-Watson has a value data that is less than 2. It shows that there is positive correlation. However, the presence of NPL positively affects commercial banks' performance. When NPL increases, it seems that the performance of commercial banks will decrease by 0.049 for the ROA. The result shows that the p-value for the present NPL, where the ROA is not significant, since it is 12%. As for the LLP, the result shows that there is negative coefficient. When LLP increases, it seems that ROA also increases by 0.00196. The result shows for the p-value for LLP is 0.16%, indicating that LLP is significant. Furthermore, the result revealed that LA has a positive outcome on the ROA. When LA increases, it seems that ROA also increases by 6.55. Based on the outcome, as for the p-value of LA, it shows that there is significance since the value is 3.08%. Based on the data analysis done in Chapter 4, we can conclude that it is not significant between the NPL and ROA. Thus, we failed to reject the null hypothesis and that NPL does not affect the ROA. Meanwhile, the other two independent variables, LLP and LA, are significant with ROA. Thus, we reject the null hypothesis and the LLP and A affect the ROA. The first implication is the sample of the study is not broad. This is due to the sample chosen of only 8 local commercial out of 27 commercial banks based in Malaysia. Hence, it is limited to evaluating the financial performance of a few selected banks. Second, the inherent limitation is secondary data. The published data is not uniform, and some banks have not disclosed it properly. As a result, this could lead to missing data for the analysis. First recommendation is to expand the scope of the study. In the future, there will be more data available ahead of time. Therefore, it is better to expand the scope of the study in the future research, such as more than 10 years in order to get a better result and significant during the data analysis. Next is, this study also used the sample of only 8 Malaysia-based commercial banks out of 27 commercial banks, which include 19 licensed foreign banks. Future researchers might consider including all 27 commercial banks instead of only 8 local commercial banks in Malaysia as sample. Thus, a study with larger sample has a high probability to get a more accurate result in data analysis. Lastly is to add more variables. Based on this study, there are only 1 independent variable and 3 independent variables. There are other variables that can be used, such as return on equity, total loans to asset ratio, and more. Due to the fact that this variable can be considered in relation with credit risk, they may affect the financial performance of the banks.